you take pages when you're done reading? Yeah. Okay, thanks.
All right, 1 off, 2 off, affirmative case. All right, Paul, ready?
Yep.
Judge ready? My standard is constructive moral engagement with the other. Self-acceptance of the duty to empathize with others is the only way to motivate ethical conduct. Otherwise, we won't care about how our actions affect others. Van Dorn. People adopt moral standards that serve as guides regarding moral conduct. Process people monitor their conduct and conditions under which it occurs, judge in relation to their moral standards and perceived circumstances to regulate their actions by the consequences they apply to themselves. People can choose to behave otherwise by exerting self-influence, self-sanction, keep conduct in line with personal standards. This passive self-influence gives meaning to moral agency. Self-sanction is marked presses moral off. First off case. Historically, minors can canary while working. The bird's respiratory system was sensitive to the toxins and unsafe mines. If the canary died, the miners knew to get out before it was too late. Without the canary, the miners would die silently and unexpectedly. I am a miner's canary. First at Yale, someone left a threatening note challenging my right to compete because the, quote, affirmative action sucks. Second, LD debaters stereotype because they keep thinking that black people are all the same and think alike. If this year's TOC coaches and debaters now assume based on skin color that I must debate the game the same way as Elijah Smith did from last year. Third, my courage to discuss racism in all its forms being characterized by the community as quote-unquote comfort zone, and I need to get out of it. This is insensitive to the fact that nothing is more scary than being racially targeted. Fourth, the black judge on top 2-1 decision against me at Newark Knockers told my coaches that his decision was driven by the fear of being perceived as racially preferring me instead of the arguments made in round. This proves that national circuit is so hostile that some black judges are afraid to vote on base who they feel did the better debating. Response argue that constructive moral engagement requires the violence. I am a miner's canary as I represent these black and brown bodies which the debate community consistently spits. So my experience functions as the warning signal and the warning sign within that analogy. So, in response, these are the moral engagements that require the violence or the justifications. First, I've been systematically attacked and bullied to scare me away from being here. These acts make TOC a dangerous place. Criterion requires that you vote for me because choosing to look away from this is saying that minority people aren't worth defending. Second, TOC committee refused to defend me because violent threats and harassment online for political reasons. When bystanders do nothing, they treat the victim as a subhuman sacrifice with no worth as a judge. The values debate that makes no sense to assert that we are debating about ethics within sacrifice that's sensitive at home. Third, debaters on the circuit use each loss of justification to defend their behavior against me and subsequently other harass people in the future. That's why this runs by is high stakes and why now is only time. If you feel bullying is wrong, incentivize it by giving me a loss of more. Fourth year vote for Bodine J is required. First step to end the cycle. Barbara Colorado furthers. Cycle of violence can be interrupted in circles of caring can grow bigger and stronger when even one person has the more strength to stand up and speak out. The whole community is willing to say no to tyranny with some bullies. The cycle of violence can be broken. Judges don't use their violence speaking out because as soon as the activity will also betray their moral compass. Fifth, even if the affirmative links to the criterion, the link coming off the AC, that's not sufficient to win because my off-case functions at a discursive level. While case debate operates in terms of top thus if the affirmative loses the discursive level, you negate since you can't vote as if you don't endorse the in-round performance along with the topic. All right, let's go specifically to the second part. The affirmative values conception of morality and justice. This leads to procedurism. Chef and Derrida quote. Justice is an experience impossible. It's not possible to arrive at a fundamental procedure by which to regulate a fair decision because a decision that can be computed is not a just decision. It can only be a calculation. There's no moment in which a decision can be called fully just. Either has been made according to a rule and nothing allows us to call justice a result without a rule, whether perceived, confirmed, conserved, or reinvented, which in turn is not absolutely guaranteed by anything. More of a word guaranteed decision would reduce the calculation. We wouldn't call it just. Criminal justice system has a series double line between calculation and conformity rules and making new rules that deviate from previous ones. Thus, the affirmative can never achieve justice and morality because they either reinforce the status quo in ways that perpetuate the oppression or change in ways that make the status quo unpredictable. This severs the links coming out of the affirmative case because it's showing you insofar as he's valuing some form of morality or social policy that's claimed to like stop rationality or give individuals the chance to repress back, they never can. And so far as the state is allowed to imply justice ambiguously in some form of a calculation, but this second can't prove the rest is true without kicking out of its framework. And the third argument, any affirmative impacts related to procedural awareness or fairness are not functional enough to call just because of ambiguity. Then go specifically to the affirmative case. All right. So first off, the value of morality. This is where the second off cases interact. And second reason you're not going to look towards the value of morality because insofar as we don't talk about actions or actions that are made to reduce real life in realm morality that can create change. The purpose of talking about morality in realm ultimately becomes self-defeating in a facade to continue perpetuating these abuses. Then, off the objective arguments. One, he's not telling you what's objective. Secondly, his form of objective speaks from a position of privilege, right? Like, I asked him questions about endorsing power, or is it okay to endorse a preference? Like, no, because I don't want to lose a round, right? So now you don't know where his advocacy is. Don't let him shift advocacies in the next speech, but further, you're going to continue. He can never link into the affirmative case insofar as he doesn't want to sympathize with the other. He doesn't want to have discourse with the other. He wants to win the round. But then go specifically to the arguments about individual actions. insofar as he's dehumanizing it. He's not humanizing the realm because he's talking about things from a hypothetical level. This has two bad implications. The first is when we don't humanize the resolution, this allows us to talk about individuals in units or numbers, as we see some Western philosophers do, which allow us to talk about individual races in a way that may offend or make individuals necessarily feel non-complicit to engage in the corrective discourse. But then second, when we don't humanize the resolutions, this doesn't give us a real perspective of what is moral, because when you are talking about something moral and you're trying to talk about something just from a viewpoint that looks and takes into account of all people, we have to speak from social locations and give different arguments from different social locations. He does none of that with the hypothetical justification. Then I'll go to the spike about like the judge has to vote on the text. One, insofar as I'm coming into this realm with inherent disadvantages that are being applied off of the first off case example, I'm telling you how I don't know I can be adjudicated fairly. The text, or ultimately fairness in the realm, becomes nonsensical insofar as the realm is never fair as soon as I stepped in. The second argument, or the second reason you're not looking towards this, because he's not telling you why you have that jurisdiction to the text. He's not telling you why it's important that we talked about the textual resolution. But then the third reason you're never going to look towards the text is because a focus on the text and a focus on talking about the text shifts discourse away from the important issues that really matter. Right now, the community is screwing minorities over, but if we always talk about the text, we're never going to be able to necessarily focus or engage in these conflicts and in these problems, right? And I'm telling you exclusively, like many of you in this room would not have known these problems had to me if we only talked about the text. These are all independent reasons to vote negative. But then go specifically to the value criteria. So you can cross-apply the off case here to the value. The value is still showing you as to why you can't have this consistency. But then overview to the affirmative case. Insofar as individuals are disenfranchised within the criminal justice system, approximately 1.4 million African Americans are disenfranchised. They are cut off from access to vote, gain employment, and gain other forms of housing. This means they can't check back against the government or the asymmetrical moves he's talking about. This argument is always going to outweigh the affirmative case. Insofar as I'm giving you a direct number, I'm giving you a group that's being quantified, and because they cannot get these rights back, it's irreversible. Then off of the Ainsworth analysis, which talks about judges not having to justify the decisions. One, the evidence just says they don't have to justify them knowing the law, not that they have to change decisions. And secondly, always prefer the discursive arguments coming out of the negative advocacy, because I'm showing you why these operate at a higher level.
So really quick, what was the second argument you said to reject my value besides the off case?
The second argument?
Yeah, or was it just that the off case means I can't achieve morality?
No, there were more than two arguments. The second argument, coming off the reasons of why we look towards morality, is how it's used as a facade by the state to perpetuate rights abuse.
Okay, so if you don't look to my value, then that means that nothing can be. So like according to the Duridian off case, there's no such thing as justice, right? As objective
No, that's
justice.
not the argument. The argument is that the way the state tries to implement justice is not just, because the way it uses
it's unjust, or it's a flawed conception of justice?
No, it says that it's unjust because it tries to make things through calculation.
Why is calculation unjust?
Right, because that explains that there's intentionality behind the action and the way the state perpetuates these rights abuses. You know, the things you don't think are bad.
Calculation leads to a perpetuation of rights abuses? So like when I make a graph on my TI-89, that leads to like massive rights abuses?
Bad joke. You're not applying it to the state function.
Okay. Let's talk about the off case.
Right,
Why is the off case pre-fiat? Why is the off case pre-fiat?
What do you mean pre-fiat?
Okay, where do you win that the off case? So is the off case pre-fiat or post-fiat?
My argument is that the off case comes before talking about textual arguments in the resolution. I'm keeping it plain and simple.
Okay, what's my turn ground on the off case?
I'm not going to give you disads. You know,
so I have no turn ground on the off case.
My argument on the off case is
all right.
That you can't link because you don't want to talk about
I can't link. So
you don't want to answer questions.
I don't want to answer questions, so I can't link the off case.
Yeah, like
okay,
your
that's
argument
fine.
specifically.
What is the reason why fairness?
Exactly
why is fairness not important?
That's explained through the arguments coming out of the AC. Fairness is just used as a way to shift discourse from talking about issues that affect people to the topic. So it allows for those abuses. Secondly, fairness.
Okay, why are those abuses relevant? Where do you justify why those kinds of abuses that you're talking about are implications to the ballot?
That's all through the NC. And I'm sorry if you don't think rights abuses that happen to
No, Jalon, don't worry. I think that rights abuses are bad. So is the only argument in
the AC? I mean the NC.
It's in the NC.
Talks about that.
Where? What arguments say that they implicate the ballot because oppression is bad?
All right, let's go ahead and go through them. If you go through the
Bandora.
All right, 6 justification for the rule of ballot.
Well, I see the argument that says that you're a canary. So if you're a canary,
also talks about it. I'm proud to be a canary.
Okay, so this argument says that there's systematic racism, which prevents people.
No, you're not understanding the total complexities of the argument, right? That argument is telling you specifically that when we're looking towards political race and the experience through my black body, right? We need to implement and use the minor-sectarian example so we can look through things through the eyes of political race, and the apparatus through which we do that is my black body and the experience I give you. If you can understand my experiences.
Okay, that's fine. So just really quick, so the whole reason fairness is not relevant is because it excludes discourse.
That's not the only reason.
What's the other reason?
I don't think I want to answer that question.
Okay.
Right? Because supposedly it's about winning.
You got me. Okay. Okay. We're going to start with that. What are the reasons? All right.